The first day of school at Jefferson High was a feeling of excitement mixed with dread for Michael Johnson. Stepping off the bus, he found himself clinging to his old battered backpack like it was a safety blanket, trying to blot out that knot of nerves in his stomach. He looked up at the tall school building, its enormity weighing down on him. His family had just relocated here from another part of town, seeking better opportunities after their cramped apartment had become too difficult to manage by his single mother with her many jobs. Michael weaved in and out through the kids filling the halls, with the directions to Mrs. Foster's classroom and his anxiety building. The hallway was abuzz with the chattering of students who seemed to all know one another. Entering the classroom, he found groups of laughing students talking animatedly. He felt like an outsider as he slipped into an empty seat at the back. Mrs. Foster was a very strict woman who demanded much from all, so she barely noticed Michael. She got on with her lesson quite fast in a businesslike way. Michael raised a hand to try his participation in class, but it went completely unnoticed among the sea of familiar faces. He was just another new student, lost and trying to find himself. Michael Johnson had always turned to the music that he played on his family's old piano to find comfort. In the corner of their small apartment stood this worn, faded instrument from better times. Sure, it was an old instrument and far from perfect, but it was Michael's way out from all the hardships in life. His mother would tell him to play, tired from working all day, suspecting the piano as a comfort for him. His musical talent went completely unnoticed at school. Classmates and teachers were simply too entangled in their own matters to pay notice to the silent strength he had borne within himself. It was something he kept hidden, fearing it would make him stand out in some ways, particularly the type that would draw even more unwanted attention toward him. His grades were average, his social interaction limited, and his presence in class barely noticeable. In the evenings after finishing homework, Michael would sit at the piano and let the music run out of his fingers. Intricate, soulful, they were a reflection of the inner life of this young man, full of dreams and struggle. The piano became a haven for him, his means to express emotions he couldn't find words for. But this gift remained unknown to the world outside his small, dimly lit apartment. In a matter of weeks, Michael Johnson was the common punching bag for bullies at Jefferson High. The poor kid's old apparel and shy demeanor actually made it the easiest for the relentless predators that walked the corridors in search of whom to devour. They teased him over his looks, taunted him by his meek nature, and even jeered at him in the thronged halls. Each day became a torture of sorts, and Michael started to dread going to school. Michael tried to go through each day, hidden under a cloak of invisibility, but still the bullies emerged. Most of the time, he would come back home with bruises all over and a heavy heart, feeling lonely and helpless about everything. His mother did notice the gloom that had enveloped this once chirpy son of hers, and never tired of comforting him, hugging him tightly to offer solace, though her words never seemed to ease the pain. Real peace only came to Michael when he played the piano at home. The music enabled him to blur the vivid reality of his school life, and for a moment to tread in a balance of silence and tranquility. This is, however, a place made secret by himself and is unrevealed to the other world, which seems so careless of all the pain he has been going through there. It was on a nippy November afternoon when Mrs. Foster, that strict teacher, needed some time off from grading papers. She moved towards some quiet place and entered the music room, a place she never really visited. The only things there were an old piano, completely forgotten by students. As Mrs. Foster sank into the chair, the atmosphere was suddenly filled with a fine flow of music. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she followed the sound until it led her to Michael Johnson at the piano. His fingers were gliding across keys, and he was playing a tune that was most beautiful, full of passion, and mastered like nobody's business. His eyes were closed. He was lost in the music, his whole body swaying gently with every note. Mrs. Foster was enthralled. The music was intricate and full of soul, much beyond she had expected from her students. She was moved by the depths of the piece. It touched something that hadn't been stirred in her for years. She watched in silence while her heart was touched with the raw beauty in Michael's performance. For the first time, she saw him not just as any other student, but a person who had hidden talent that deserved to be appreciated. Still in the shock of what she had just heard, Mrs. Foster could not turn off the impression immediately after this accident, a sudden encounter with Michael at the piano. The next day, intending to know more, she confronted Michael with curiosity and a little concern. "Michael, that yesterday performance was so extraordinary," she gently started. "Why didn't you share this with us before?" "I thought it didn't matter. No one really looks at me anyway." Michael shrugged, still jolted and embarrassed. Mrs. Foster felt guilty about not seeing Michael's potential earlier. She realized that he had been so focused on the other kids, the ones who were doing well, that he had been blinded to the hidden, quiet class talents like Michael. "Your music is amazing, Michael. It means something special, and I want to help you find a way to spread it around. Your gift." She pushed him to perform at the next school assembly. Reluctant, Michael agreed again, further pushing himself with the security of Mrs. Foster's relentless support. To prepare, Mrs. Foster arranged for him to practice in a more private setting, making sure he had space to work out the piece. In each practice session, Michael gained confidence, and for the first time, he began to believe that his talent could shine beyond the confines of his small world. Well, the day finally came for the school assembly, and Michael was nervous. The students and teachers bustled about in the auditorium with great anticipation. Mrs. Foster was right next to him, urging him on. "You got this, Michael," she said. "Just be yourself and let the music speak." It was Michael's turn now. Taking a deep breath, he walked out onto the stage. The bright lights and faces in expectation of some sort of entertainment set his heart racing, but he focused his mind on those familiar keys of the piano. There could be silence as he began playing. The melody, so rehearsed, flowed with ease. He seemed to pour his emotion, his struggles, kept hidden for years, into every single note. With the last notes of the auditorium fading away, the audience stared on in Michael, awed by his depth in playing. When he was done, thunderous applause arose. Students who used to ignore him cheered now, while teachers watched with newfound respect. It was a real turnaround performance for Michael, the hitherto unnoticed student turned musician of repute. All the efforts of Mrs. Foster to popularize him began to pay through his confidence taking wing on the realization that his hidden talent had come under notice and acclaim. Well, that was just the beginning. Michael's performance during school assembly was only the beginning. Soon enough, the word spread like wildfire throughout the community in respect to his fantastic talent. The local media latched onto the story to proclaim the young musician who overcame so many of life's challenges. Attention, Michael found himself in the limelight that he barely could have expected. Attention brought various new opportunities. Michael was asked to sing at local functions, while several organizations offered scholarships to help in his education. With every performance came more appreciation and affirmation, healing some of the wounds from past struggles. He could now feel that the dreams of his becoming a professional musician were getting very real. This was very critical to Mrs. Foster. She went further to mentor Michael through all the demands that were now expanding in his new fame, guiding him with interviews and performances, always keeping him focused on the music. Their relationship was becoming tighter as Mrs. Foster became not only a mentor, but a trusted friend. Michael's success was much more than his personal victory alone. It became a testimony to the fact that sometimes people are capable of believing in someone even when they stop believing in themselves. At every new milestone, he felt deep, abiding gratitude for the kind of support that had turned a talent hidden until then into glittering reality. Then, just as Michael's life was finally taking off and going uphill, came a sharp, serious setback that shook his world. His mother, his rock and support, fell seriously ill. The doctors pronounced a grave diagnosis, some kind of serious condition requiring long-term treatment and frequent hospitalization. The news hit Michael really hard, amplifying his stress and anxiety. School, an increasing performance schedule, and attempting to tend to his sick mother were too much. Even the piano, a place of comfort and solace that he knew so well, now seemed like a reminder of the pressures he was under. Daily visits to the hospital struggled to keep up with studies and performance preparation as he watched his mother worsen. That struggle was now in his music, in place of jovial melodies, undertones of sadness and weariness. She saw the change, and Mrs. Foster knew it was time to act. She lined up a fundraiser to benefit Michael's family, mobilizing the town to come out and display its caring. It was an outpouring of generosity, relieving some of the financial burdens and allowing Michael to find a glimmer of hope. Despite being tried, the strength of Michael still managed to shine through in overcoming. The support from Mrs. Foster and the community strengthened his will to continue following his passion while caring for his mother. Slowly, with the help of his community and the gradual recovery of his mother, Michael Johnson began to get his life back together. Much of the financial burden had been relieved through the fundraiser, allowing him to work more on his music and less on day-to-day fighting. His mother was getting well, and she was soon able to come home and therefore bring some relief and normalcy back into Michael's life. Michael returned to the stage with much more power and attachment to his music at a deeper emotional level. His performances exemplified more than just talent displays. They represented resilience and thankfulness. What moved audiences was the profundity, sincerity of the work, and the story of overcoming, which resounded deep within too many. Apart from his rising success, Michael used his platform to give back. He began working with local charities to support underprivileged youth, teaching music to those who, just like him, had hidden talents waiting to be discovered. His efforts didn't only help others, but also reinforced his own sense of purpose. The example of Michael's transformation from a sideline student to a world-renowned musician epitomized the triumph of the human spirit. It was through turning his struggles into triumphs that he had shown even the darkest moment could result in the most extraordinary achievement. Years had gone by, and Michael Johnson had grown from a shy, overlooked student into an acknowledged musician. He now stood at the grand stage of a very famous concert hall, about to perform in front of a full house. The place represented the distance he traveled from that small, worn piano back at his old apartment, signifying how far he had come in his journey. As Michael stood up to play, his eyes swept the audience, grateful. There in the auditorium was Mrs. Foster, beaming with a smile. She had long retired from teaching, but had never really forgotten the shy student whose talent had once gone undiscovered. Their bond had come at a hard time and was resilient enough to last, which made her overjoyed about Michael's success. It was simply breathtaking. Years of experience and emotional depth were inserted into